When did it get so cold? I feel like it was summer, like 2 days ago, and it was warm and it was humid, and now it's just rainy and cold and miserable. But apparently there's a typhoon coming through right now, and so there's supposed to be a ton of rain. Let's take advantage of that. Well, we took advantage of that. So yesterday I went out to do a little Tokyo night rain shoot. So I wanted to capture business people wearing suits, these salarymen with their umbrellas, walking through from their offices to essentially the station. And Tokyo Station ends up being, one, it's a photogenic area, but two, you have a lot of these big office buildings, and so I thought it'd be the perfect place for that. And because of the rain and I was holding an umbrella, I couldn't have my Insta360 ONE R mounted the same way I usually do, pretty much from my backpack up above behind me. And so I had to attach it via this ball head. This came with one of my aperture lights, and essentially the ball head just screws right into the ONE R, and then this just goes right into the cold shoe. And so that way we're able to do this thing where you get like a POV view from the camera. But yeah, this setup has a few pros and a few cons to it, and I didn't have my settings quite right on the ONE R, so the footage is a little bit wonky, especially because it was so dark. But let's check that out, and then I'll talk about what I liked about this and what I didn't like about it. So we are on top of Kite at the Kite Garden, which is located right next to Tokyo Station. So behind me right now is Tokyo Station down there. This is actually a pretty cool spot. Depending on the light and the weather, I think when the sun's setting in the evening, this looks super pretty. And then at night, all these lights come up, and they usually do a lot of lighting and illumination things here. So it is pretty cool. And if you keep kind of going down the path up here, you have the trains as well. So if you want to take photos of trains, you have some of the Shinkansen and then just the regular JR lines here. But yeah, overall, I like this spot. I wish that JR little passage was lit up. Any lights near it, because that'd be kind of cool. So I'm shooting right now in AV priority, so the aperture priority. Pros is that holding the umbrella and doing this one-handed, it makes it a lot easier. Cons is that because it's so dark outside, even at 800 ISO, it's a little bit difficult to get it steady, and like the shutter speed gets super low, so a lot of these are at like 1/60, 1/30, and it makes it really tricky. Right here's where I want it. This lady should be coming through. We're doing it! So, pros and cons of using this setup. To start off, this is more of an error on my part and not necessarily con, but it was pretty dark. It was around 5 o'clock before the sun was set. However, it was cloudy and rainy and whatnot. And I had the exposure setting on auto. Now that's normally not a problem, but when it does get dark, the shutter speed might get a little bit too low to compensate, and when you have that, you get a lot of that motion blur. I also didn't have the low light settings enabled on here, and I probably should have checked all that before just snapping away. But in terms of actual cons of using this setup, it's heavy. So having it in my hand the entire time I was out there for about an hour, the body that I'm using, the ADD, the Sigma, plus this ball head that's like all metal, and the 1R on top, it gets super heavy really fast. I don't use a neck strap, I use a hand strap, a hand grip to carry my things, and yeah, my wrist is pretty sore. But that being said, this setup, I actually really enjoyed using it this way. There's a couple things. In terms of the view that you get, you do get this standard like GoPro POV that you've probably seen in other videos, and you still get that frontal view. You're able to see what essentially the camera is seeing before the shot's taken. But in addition to that, when you angle it a little bit like this, what ends up happening is it's far enough away from your face where if you turn to this camera that's facing you, it still looks pretty decent because it's so wide, and you still get the first-person perspective out of the camera side. And so you do get that dual perspective. It's nice to have that with 360 camera. The other thing I really liked about this is when you're shooting normally in landscape, you know, it's going as normal, but then when you tilt it to the side or you rotate it to go into that portrait mode, normally with a GoPro, it ends up turning that image as well, and it looks a little bit wonky. But with the 360, because again, it's capturing everything, you still get a 16:9 horizontal image, and it doesn't really change that much. It's really nice to be able to have still this horizontal shot to capture the perspective while the camera, you're taking a vertical photo. Pretty fun. And the last thing with this, because it was raining, I was a little bit afraid. The Sigma lens is not weatherproof, so I'm a little bit concerned about that. But again, I mean, all action cameras are pretty much weatherproof or waterproof, but it's just nice to not have to worry about, oh, it's wet, it's gonna get broken or anything like that. The other day I had it pretty much in a waterfall and it was fine, so. But yeah, that's just a little bit about this shoot and, you know, this setup that I was testing out. I think if I wanted to continue using it this way, I would have to try and figure out a lighter solution, and the only possible way to do that, I guess, is to use a smaller lens or a different ball head. But overall, not too shabby. I don't know, I'll try this again in better light, and that way the footage won't look as blurry. But let me know what you guys thought. If you guys have the Insta360 ONE R, let me know how are you guys using it? Are there any tips or suggestions that you guys have in terms of setup? Leave them in the comments below. Also, if you are interested in purchasing the Insta360 ONE R, there is actually a Amazon Prime Day flash sale going on. And if you go onto Amazon, this thing will be a little bit cheaper. I also have a discount code in the description box below. You can use that to get a little discount off your ONE R. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed everything, and you know, have a good October. All right, thanks so much. Peace.